outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio's Education Tonight with myself, Adam Spence, and my partner in crime, Brent Poland. Good evening, Brent.
I've done no crime, I've done no time, I'm innocent.
I don't know about you, I've never noticed that acoustic, like orchestral music over the opening kind of slides before. It's a bit like Italia, remember the Italia 90 kind of, I was expecting the Rudyard Kipling poem to kind of come over the top.
Don't mention Italian 90, you're an Irishman, that's all I'm saying, you know.
Yeah. I think that everybody, everyone thought Pavarotti had just come into the room, Brent, so thank you very much. Mind you, watching you eat then was a bit kind of shoving it in with a bit of Italiano, kind of ramming the Italian food in.
I think one of the skills we develop as teachers is the ability to eat on the hoof, the ability to hold your bladder more than a racehorse, and the ability to hold your tongue when you hear the words Ofsted, and during insets when you hear certain things, you think, oh, here we go again. The sort of skills that you develop as an experienced teacher, you know, your lungs are probably lined with God knows what, you know, probably asbestos in the schools you've got, and you probably, you know, it's true. But I'll tell you one thing I've noticed: retired teachers always look younger. It's true. I just seen one of my colleagues who retired, and I'm like, my God! Like every time I see John Gibbs, he just gets younger every time. He's like reverse Dorian Gray. It's great. So yeah, we're hardcore we teachers, and yes, I'm sorry about what you watching me eat before we go on live, but it's been a busy day, 6-period day for me.
Yeah, well, we know Nick Gibbs got Michael Gove in the attic. That's why. that's a kind of key.
Why did I feel like that was a Pulp Fiction moment?
Yeah. Apparently Lucy and Hannah did a show about teacher talents on Tuesday, so you can listen back to the secret powers of teachers. But this is part of a kind of double header for you tonight, Brent, isn't it? You're off onto Chris's show afterwards as well.
Yes, so Chris, myself, and the prof himself, Paul Hazard, are going to be talking. It's World Men's Day, so I thought, well, we blokes are going to have a little chat about being a modern man and obviously what's it like in schools, and equally what we can do for the next generation of young men. And I think it's a pertinent question considering, unfortunately, this week I had to attend a funeral of my auntie, who's my last sort of connection to the London family, the London Irish family. And I was talking to one of my cousins who sadly, one of my cousins took his life. And it's just one of those things when you talk to, you talk about it and you sort of think to yourself, men's mental health just never gets such a mention. And I think it's the culture now needs to sort of change about talking about men, having a chat about talking about men. And I think that's a good thing that we're going to try and do, is just have that conversation about just being a man and being a man in the education system and the young men that we're trying to foster and the big changes there are in society, because the world never stops evolving and changing. And I think we need to evolve and change. So we're going to have that conversation.
Where's that on? So if people want to kind of listen straight after the show, where
that's going to be on SteamYard. So it's going to be Chris's debut on SteamYard. It will be 9:15. We'll be doing that. And again, all contributions welcome. It's not just for the men. You're more than happy to tune in as well. And even if you're not one of the brotherhood, so it's because I do. It's something I feel strongly about. It's something I feel strongly about modeling masculinity, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to go out and do the toxic masculinity. I think you can be masculine without skinning an animal alive and going into the woods and becoming Bear Grylls.
Yeah.
Although I will confess that I have got qualifications in such things, and one of my 40th birthday presents was to have a 3-day weekend with Bear Grylls training course, and I do have the survival course. So just in case the apocalypse comes, I'm your man in the woods. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think we should do like pay per view on that, Brent. I think with that one we could do like a special education tonight, where you could do like a pay per view, what they call like Patreon special, where we could raise some money for Teacher Talk Radio. But that's on. So you're on that at 9:15. So
9:15. Yes, so we're going to finish pretty sharpish tonight. So that's going to be an achievement in itself. So
I'll keep an eye on the clock. But let's enjoy our hour together before you kind of run off. And go on someone else's show if you like. I don't care.
You jealous? Am I cheating on you?
I think so. I think this is happening live, isn't it? This is the end, isn't it? This is one of those moments. This is the start of it. But we're actually on a date on Tuesday, so you can make it up to me then. We
are going on a date on Tuesday, aren't we? Yeah.
Okay, so
this is like Deadpool. This is Deadpool and Wolverine going on here, isn't it? Really, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, let's get on with tonight. Let's get on with tonight's show. So, we first of all like to say that this show tonight is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore a full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order, and you can see the kind of website scrolling along the bottom. So it's been a kind of a topic that we wanted to do for a while. And it's kind of been a topic that's been kind of or two topics that have been bubbling nicely under the surface for us to kind of pick up. One is the SEND crisis. And obviously that was it was mentioned in the budget, but obviously since the budget, there's been kind of lots of, comments about it, particularly from the Secretary of State for Education and lots of people around her. And the second issue might be kind of one of those things that we've said before, Brent, when it's a kind of Venn diagram situation. Parents and teacher conflicts, are they getting worse? Is one causing the other? Maybe it's something we can kind of explore to kind of touch on that. But before we start, I'm going to just play a short video from the National Audit Office that kind of sets the scene for what we're going to talk about. So if that could be kind of queued up for me, thank you very much.
Yeah, and obviously,
the special educational needs system is in urgent need of reform. Despite a decade of increased delivering for children or their families, and is financially unsustainable. High needs funding rose to £10.7 billion in 2024-25, but by March 2026, 2/5 of local authorities face the risk of issuing a Section 114 notice, effectively declaring bankruptcy. A solution to manage local authorities' projected £4.6 billion deficit has yet to be identified. Government urgently needs to share with local authorities facing serious financial risk plans for how deficits will be treated and the wider financial impact managed. We also recommend the Department for Education considers whole system reform and develops a long-term plan for inclusivity of special education.
Okay, so that was the support for children and young people with special needs by the National Audit Office, and it's interesting because that has actually been kind of used and quoted by Bridget Phillipson, and she's talked about it in terms of putting it into the curriculum review that's happening now. So we've actually got kind of part of Bridget Phillipson's kind of speech that she made that included this. So if that could go up just so people could kind of read it as Brent's kind of introducing it. So what have you found here in this speech, Brent?
Yeah, so what she did was she used the NIO and the watchdog effectively as the ideological and the backup, the sort of intellectual backup and their findings, which is good because that's evidence-based. And I think it's good when you make policy based upon facts and evidence and you're using what's actually happening on the ground. And I don't think that has been the case for far too long, because one of the things we'll outline later on is the previous government was ignoring the evidence. Who knew? Because we were screaming, weren't we, for a long, long time about the oncoming crisis in funding, teacher retention. And SEND is just one of those things that's reached that critical mass. I've participated in so many online forums and so many talk debates where, you get parent after parent ringing up. I've seen even in my local Spotted page, you know, a parent even tonight asking for anybody with any experience with solicitors dealing with SEND. So there is just more. It's just more and more. So what Bridget Phillipson has said is she wants all children with SEND to achieve and thrive. This is her her statement that she made based upon that, and she made that statement about SEND particularly, but it was all about education, but obviously SEND was a big part of it. She reckons that the curriculum assessment review will look at the barriers that hold back those with SEND. And statistically speaking, those with SEND, the statistics are pretty hardcore. They do suffer more when it comes to GCSEs regardless. And there's massive gaps opening up, not just massive gaps when you're opening up, but also when you look at SEND in particular children, particular backgrounds, especially when you add SEND to pupil premium, and when you add SEND to pupil premium and disadvantaged students, the statistics are absolutely damning on that. The gaps are getting bigger, which again, we would not, wouldn't surprise us when we know how much the NHS social services are in retreat and schools are asked to pick up a lot more. So we have a double whammy. We've got an increase in diagnosis and a decrease in our capacity. So, and money is going in, but it's just not going the right place. So what she says, early intervention is vital. Can't agree with that more. Obviously, the younger, the better. So there's increased training for early years providers to identify support the children sooner. Absolutely. If you get a diagnosis quicker and sooner, you can start putting the help in. And I think that will help some of the parents, because what we get in secondary school is we get legacy issues. We get parents who are fighting for years their children in primary, and they come with a lot of baggage. And that's no disrespect to those parents. And I know some of those parents personally, and I had a parents even recently where I turned around to a parent and says, "I'm really sorry for being a pain." I went, "No, you're not. You're just being a good parent. You're just fighting your child's corner." And I don't for 1 minute, you know, think that you're being a pain. You're just doing what every parent wants, to right by their child, and that's what many of these parents are doing. They're just trying to fight the corner for their children. And the problem is that once they start down that route, you can imagine the frustration is they're just so used to getting nothing out. And it can take a while to build a relationship with a parent who's had, I would say, some sort of trauma of dealing with this. And there are people, I think, being traumatized because they're just not being listened to. They're being gaslit. They're not getting the provision for their children. They're having to cope with their children's complex needs. They're trying to work multiple jobs. So I am torn sometimes between defending schools on this, but also realizing that there are human beings and there are children at the center of this, and that there are hard-working families who just want their children to be provided for, and local authorities who also sometimes maybe trying to do their best, but they've had their funding pulled. It's just there's a lot of people doing things.
A lot of times, like I think to support teachers, we're on the same side, aren't we?
Absolutely,
we want the best for their children as well. It's sometimes that we have a kind of battle our end, like they have a battle their end. So the two people in the middle, i.e. the parent and the teacher, you know, end up kind of, and this is maybe linking to the story later about kind of conflict.
I think that is the narrative, obviously, of some parents are in conflict mode because they've been in conflict mode, and maybe they don't know how to switch off conflict mode because maybe they've just learned that the only way that you get something is being in that confrontational situation of going straight to, it's like the old adage of, I don't want to speak to I don't want to speak to you. I want to speak to your supervisor. You know, I think we're getting that in education now where, and again, our evidence will show that. But I do like what Bridget Phillipson has said here. You know, we will look at the experts. We will increase strength and accountability in mainstream schools to be inclusive. So that's basically saying, you know, are you saying you're inclusive, or are you really being inclusive? I mean, you look at the statistics on off-rolling. You look at all of those statistics now. One of the things I would criticize her for is you cannot do that using Ofsted. That was the problem before. When you're using a crude measure in league tables and Ofsted, they don't tell the story. So I think you cannot do this in isolation. And that's where I would worry.
But this is part of a bigger speech, and within that speech, she does talk about well-being. You know, less focus on exams. So I think, kind of hidden within that, there's a kind of a slight accusation that some schools have focused too much on their Ofsted grading, too much on their exams, and not focused enough on children's well-being.
but you have to then make sure that you're not grading those schools. And a report card for me, is that enough? We have to see what the weighting of those new Ofsted grades are and what weighting they put on things like that. What I do like is we were guided by experts, incredible people across the sector. So talking to T players, talking to the experts, talking to the people, the neuroscientists, talking to educators, I think that's a really good idea when you get a cross section. I just worry that when you sometimes get, I'm married to a clinical psychologist, and that's great, fantastic. I understand childhood trauma. Believe me, I understand childhood trauma. But you do get sometimes people criticizing educators in schools and saying, we're doing this, you're doing that, doing the eye, doing it wrong. You think in real times, it's easy to be critical of people trying to do their best. And I just worry that those experts have to be as broad and balanced. And if she is listening to the experts, to make sure there is a broad and balanced a field of experts, their cross section, and sometimes political parties don't do that. They need to be independent, and they need not have, I think, sometimes agendas. And too often you've seen, for instance, too much agendas coming into, into education. It needs to be neutralized, and it needs to be evidence-based, and it needs to be peer reviewed, and it needs to be consensus, and it needs to be evidence. And that's my only stipulation with that. Please do announce that you bring leading neurodiversity experts, including those with lived experience. Can't argue with that. And understand, improve inclusivity. So this idea of actually, and do you know what really that is saying, what it's not saying? I think that's a return to the mantra of every child matters. When you think of that, that is this generation's version of every child matters. And when I started teacher training 20 years ago, that was one of the big things, wasn't it? Every child matters, every child matters, every child matters. And I think that's an important thing, because every child does matter. And that is a kind of coded way of saying that.
So you can see JLB's comment there. I think kind of echoes kind of what a lot of teachers think, is when they're trying to teach kind of high and moderate achievers in the same classes. Now it's interesting, because one of the things that worked for me years ago was, trying to within the school system, within the secondary school, actually having kind of alternative provision that runs kind of as an equal weighting as well. So a proper kind of curriculum that can kind of fit all needs. But that's the other problem that's probably not mentioned here, is the curriculum's become so narrow that basically everybody has to do certain things. And actually, a lot of students might get kind of better access to other types of curriculum. Look at where we were, and it might link into the local community as well, where I used to teach near you. One of the provisions that we used to be able to do was actually have like a proper vocational studies in a farm and stuff, which linked to kind of their local college, linked to their kind of environments, and it's fantastic.
It used to work well because your school was more vocational, less academic, but it suited the intake. And I used to admire that about your school, and admire that about your teachers. Your pitch was, okay, you're not going to be getting as many kids going to Oxford and Cambridge, but you are going to be getting them with hands-on practical skills. And the engineering department that you guys did, the vocational qualifications that you guys did, were equally valuable to the community. And yes, we got more academic students who ended up, doing more of your arts and humanities and everything else. And there was a school up the road that did lots of art. And I used to love the fact that we had 4 schools in the area, and each of them had one at art specialism. We were a science specialist college. You were a technical and vocational college. And then all of a sudden, these trusts and academic trusts come in, and that was it. It's competition.
And then started to compete with each other. Bizarre,
Not collegiate.
So SEND students are kind of caught in that, aren't they? And I guess none of those schools particularly was doing very well at the SAND bit. I think that was the kind of the bit that kind of fell through the middle, really.
We did well with SAND because we were a small school, and we used to get even a situation where some parents would send their child with complex needs to us as a smaller secondary school, and then their other child to a completely different school. And we had that situation because as a smaller secondary school, that care, attention, that I would have the children possibly for 5 years. Tell me the relationship I can build with a set of parents, and tell me the relationship with that child over 5 years. And that's what we used to operate, but that's before we started taking in extra year groups. Money was tight. The nature of our school shifted. And again, it all comes down to you're right about the curriculum, because forcing every child to sit and do bloated GCSEs and learn massive content in a world where they can just switch a computer on and find out stuff. I think the Govian agenda, I think, came from an idealistic point of view, and I think it's completely failed in every aspect. The way that the English curriculum is stale, or GCSEs, if you judge it by what outcome, has our education system improved? Has outcomes improved? No. Social mobility decreased. Employers crying out and saying these children.
But while we're talking about SEND, do you think it had like a deeper impact on that group in particular?
Massively. And I think the social impact of that is now felt in your NHS, in your mental health crisis. And in fact, in the statistic that was about the fact that a lot of young people now don't want to work, don't know how to work. I was a damning statistic about, this current generation. Now, people can go snowflakes, they're not resilient, all that kind of nonsense. And I don't buy into that. But they're being failed. They are being failed, and that's the thing, is that I find that a lot of young people are being failed. I just got to make sure my battery is plugged in. So,
okay, I just want to, just while you're doing that, Brent, I just want to make sure, just look at that last comments, that last bit's really a part of the speech was really kind of broad. I don't know if Lucy could mute Brent while he's fiddling around, that'd be great. So here is kind of, he's back.
Sorry.
He's back. Sorry. Oh, he's
shirt off.
So this kind of
probably
really
shirt off as somebody unplugged my laptop.
Yeah, but remember the last time I was in that off. Yeah, it's interesting, kind of this last bit here about the support system from birth to age 25. And I think I kind of want to lead on into kind of the next bit, because that's very broad. That sounds fantastic. But here we are. Here's the rub now, isn't it? Is the finances, as always.
This is the NIO evidence, yeah.
So we've got the kind of ambition. We got some more money in the budget that was kind of put aside for SEND. However, lots of councils, I think there was Oxford Council that came out almost straight away and said their provision this year alone is double last year. So just with kind of paying NIC for employees, by paying the kind of VAT, inflation, everything else, and then you stick on their SEND, essentially that's that council done. Just with their SEND and social care needs.
And what you have to appreciate is a lot of councils have been hollowed out. A lot of councils, when you look at, again, the academisation thing, a lot of their services have been hollowed out. A lot of their, they've hemorrhaged a lot of staff and functions, and which was part of the agenda of hollowing out local authorities so that you would encourage schools to seek out academisation. And interestingly, the mood music seems to be coming from the new Labour government that they're going to allow, schools to return to local authorities. Just one technical problem in that. What are you going to return to?
Well, she said she's sympathetic, isn't she? She's sympathetic to the idea that, although she doesn't enforce it, she's sympathetic to schools being returned to LEAs, if there's LEAs there, I guess.
I think we're past the point of no return unless you are going to fund that, and unless you're going to put back in place all of the services of what your local authorities used to do. And this is the thing, it's easy to turn around and blame local authorities, easy to turn around and blame schools, etc., etc. But hard up local authorities are in self-defense mode and survival mode. And yes, there have been mistakes, and at the center of this is children who have suffered as a result, but they have a difficult balancing act. Our local authorities started to close care homes. They've cut funding for people with disabilities. They've cut funding for so many programs, and this is the austerity chickens coming home to roost. And that is the problem, is that unless there is significant amount of funding that reverses austerity, you are going to see local councils who are going, this crisis will continue, because more and more parents are now seeking legal damages and demanding local councils. And I think, yes, it's great to see more funding, but there's the evidence there. 4 in 10 councils face bankruptcy over the ticking time bomb on this. And this, again, is the evidence that was presented to the NIO, and good that the Labour government's responding to it. Yeah. And, of course, with the increased numbers of educational healthcare plans, that means that with the growth in this, they need another 4 billion as well. So they aren't even treading water. They're actually behind already as it is, and they will need to have an increased top up because there is a growth in EHCPs. And we could discuss why there's a growth in EHCPs. I think there's a difficult conversation to be had, and an awkward conversation to be had about is every child who's statemented actually legitimately statemented? Are some playing the game? Are some, trying to get their child an advantage, so to speak? And I don't want to say that, because I really do, when I see an educational healthcare plan, I trust that the evidence is there and the evidence is legitimate and the evidence has been sourced. But when you know that some people go private and pay for private services, I worry that there are children who have the most needs, the highest needs, but they don't have the parents with the most cultural capital, so to speak, the most vociferous parents who will threaten, shout loudly, and know how to play games and systems. And I think those children are the forgotten children of this crisis.
Yeah, particularly if you come from a family that has been through a system with undiagnosed SEND needs, they might not necessarily be aware that they have learning needs, and therefore they don't obviously apply for it. They just maybe think that's just them, that's just the way it is, and never actually think
our generation, Adam, how many people have you talked to our generation are starting to realize themselves, and they go, oh, gosh, the guy ADHD. I think there's an awareness in society of,
which is a good thing. Which is a good thing, isn't it?
It is a good thing.
Yeah.
But maybe is that awareness, over-awareness, and sometimes it's like, when you have a child and you differentiate for a child, do you sometimes need to differentiate for the child? Actually, you don't. You actually don't, because the last thing that child wants is to be differentiated. They want to go in because they want to be treated equally and normally. You turn around to some children and say, here's a laptop and here's all this extra help. Here's extra time in an exam. And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm fine. It's about making sure the child can access the curriculum, the child can thrive. And sometimes there's a gap between what the child says they want in school and what the parents saying. My child's entitled to this, they want this. And they're like, actually, the child has rejected that help. And in fact, what they need is not what you say they need. And I think sometimes there's disconnect between a parent's desire, what they want their child to have. My child's entitled to this, they must have this, versus actually the resource that child needs. And that resource that child needs may not be what that parent thinks it is. And there is sometimes that disconnect where we're not trusted as educational professionals, where the parent overrides us and says, and it feels like me saying, well, I'm not telling my dentist how to drill teeth, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's why I think kind of quite like this new model of kind of adaptive teaching rather than differentiated teaching. So like your lesson is just slightly kind of adapted to someone's needs, which kind of makes sense anyway, because there'll be people, whether they have a EHCP or not, everybody kind of adapts and wants to kind of learn slightly differently, don't they?
But we want our children to be able to adapt. That's the other aspect. We want our children to be able to evolve and adapt. It's like your Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Same as scaffolding. You make things too difficult, kids can't access it. You give too much help, you create a dependency culture. We want these children to become independent. We want these children to thrive. We want these children to overcome their barriers, but we need to help them overcome their barriers, but not break down their barriers. And I think slow plowing parents, sometimes with the intentions of helping their children, actually suffocate them. And I don't think they do help, because they literally enable their child to go through the education system, breaking down every barrier for them. And that's great. But that has a massive impact on other people when it drains resources. When there are other children, I think, who have got more needs. And I think sometimes you go in every school and you say, why is that child not got? There are so many times you'll go, why has that child not got an educational healthcare plan? You sometimes get that in secondary school when you look at a child arriving in secondary school and you're thinking, how in God's green earth have they not? And then you see another child and you think, how have they got that? And again, it's not a fair or balanced or equitable system at the moment. And it just shows in that, doesn't it? And we will have more and more and more educational healthcare plans, which means more demands and more money needed and more resources.
Are you saying then that the kind of assessment should be done more in the school? that it shouldn't be brought in from outside. There should be kind of experts within the school, like child psychologists in the school that can help. And then
I can tell you the last time I saw an Ed Psych.
They're looking at all, and they're almost like a doctor getting referrals from us as teachers within the centre.
Well, I can't tell you the last time I saw an Ed Psych in school, or a team around a child like there used to be. I can't tell you the last time I saw an Ed Psych. They're basically trying to find one, because there is, and I can speak from experience. When we married to a clinical psychologist, there is a shortage of clinicians, especially in NHS, because a lot of them, much like many other things, are going private.
Are you saying there's a shortage in CAMHS generally? Is that?
There's a shortage of mental health professionals. There's a shortage of mental health professionals, like there's a shortage of nurses, like there's a shortage of teachers. There's a shortage of people in the public sector. It's been hollowed out too. They're in full retreat. Social services are in full retreat. This is the crisis that SEND is not just in isolation. This is happening as a result of the withdrawal of services. The fact that you try and find a psychologist, look at the waiting lists for children with diagnosable needs in the NHS, which feeds into why some parents are so angry. God bless them. So, there's a whole downward spiral of connections to schools, of which mental health professionals are, again, and they're struggling with the demand, and they're struggling with the increased demand. And there's a double whammy there. There's an increased demand while there's a less capacity to meet that demand. So you're being hit both ends. There's more people demanding the services, but there's less people able to provide the services unless you go private. And there's a nice earner for some people if you want to diagnose people on this, privately. And there's a growth in that.
Yeah,
which,
so
like
55% of this is within the state sector, but it's grown in all sectors, hasn't it? I think pretty much. Actually, it's coming down the independent sector a little bit, hasn't it? But it's largely in the state sector. So that does suggest that there is a link to kind of other factors within SEND as well.
But there's also a caveat to this, and that's the independent sector, which actually has a higher percentage per pupil of children with SEND. And one of the criticisms of the VAT on schools, which ideologically speaking, I understand, but I do think that's been too quick to be implemented, especially halfway through a school year. Maybe could have waited on that. Is the knock-on effect it is going to have with children, some children whose parents have sent them to the private sector for the same reason they used to send them to our little secondary school, because they know a smaller school, you get more care and attention. So there is that aspect as well that I don't think has been fully thought through with the joined up thinking of the policies, because it will impact upon parents whose children are SEND in the private sector, because those parents have worked hard to try and do that. So again, I'm not a big fan of I don't agree with two-tiered education, but that is the fact of the matter. That's the real-time situation and the real-time consequences of changing policies that has knock-on effect for some of the children, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I guess this slide kind of says it all, is it really? That the DfE has no idea how much future capacity is needed or where. And this is the kind of the big worry, isn't it? That that what Bridget Phillipson was saying is great, and they're great words to say. But actually, once you start scratching the surface of this, it's going to require significant investment from the Treasury, isn't it? To get anywhere near kind of fixing it.
And I think because of the nature of this, and I think because it's good to see it getting immediate attention, it's good to see it's prioritized. I do think it's high up the agenda, and that's good, because these are vulnerable children. And what's more important than vulnerable people for me? What's more important than children? I mean, these are vulnerable children. These are the people that need our most help and assistance. So, in the lifeboat, sort of, they are the first to go in the lifeboat, aren't they? So they should be the people that need the help. And that's morally, I think, important, isn't it? In a civilized society, we should not be abandoning these children. We should be helping them and helping them to thrive, because there is an imperative that if we don't, this will cost more in care and more in knock-on effects and secondary impacts later on in life, won't it? So I don't understand why the previous administrations didn't realize this, because we want young people to grow up to thrive, break down their barriers, overcome, and some of the most amazing people in this country are people who have overcome barriers, overcome their difficulties, and they inspire us, and they sometimes turn them and use them. But they can't do that if they're not getting the opportunity. They're not getting any help. It's just it's not good enough.
Let's have a quick look at their conclusions then on this report that they've given out. Let's just pick like a few. They explicitly consider whole system reform, which I agree with. It's not just, you can't just do one without the other. Everything's got to be looked at, particularly kind of the being financially sustainable. Undertake work to understand the root causes behind the increase in SEN and the demand for EHC plans. I think we kind of touched on some of them there. Why is it that so many people are getting, or you're having kind of EHC plans at the minute? There seems to be kind of particular kind of spike kind of, but it's kind of gradually gone up, hasn't it, over time? So again, maybe that it's probably a bit about understanding, a bit about people kind of really kind of go on. We've got Paul Fozon, after speaking to a self-described Leafy School teacher. Is that the name of the academy? Leafy School Academy. They have far and far more EHP pupils joining their school at reception age. No children join our deprived area school with EHCPs and find it incredibly hard to get one. And again, as Brent was saying, I think Brent was saying that, Paul, it's that kind of cultural capital, actually understanding how to actually access.
I think Paul and I, what we're alluding to, and I do call a spade, it's discrimination. I just think it's just pure old-fashioned, not what you know, it's who you know, and cashing in those cultural chips. And it rankers me beyond belief, because I went into education to try and, level the playing field, to give every child, when you think every child should have the same opportunity in the 6th wealthiest country in the world. And I think there's a definite sort of unfortunate situation where I think who you are, where your accident of birth is far too defining of your life chances in this country, and it's getting worse. And I think this is one of those, sickening things that I think has been let go too far. I think I'll go so far as say I think it's an absolute disgrace. I think it's a stain on this country that it has been allowed to go this far, that some of the most vulnerable children are just being abandoned, left behind. And their schools as well, and the schools that need the most resources sometimes are the ones that don't get it, and the children that need the most resources aren't the ones that get it, and tokenism just won't cut it any longer. What is it saw recently that the close of youth centres, kids who went to youth centres had increased GCSEs, kids who went to Sure Start centres increased GCSEs. Children who get more help earlier on with the educational healthcare plans, do they do better? Of course they do. And where do they go? Is there a postcode lottery to that? There does seem to be.
I also want to make it very clear here. Kind of, we're not criticising these parents. I think they're doing absolutely the right thing. If you do have the means and you do know how to actually fill out a form, of course you would do that. You'd absolutely want the very, very best, wouldn't you? Especially if you've got a child at home coming home from school, probably really upset, really angry, having a complete kind of breakdown when they get home. You're going to want to pursue every avenue, and that's a good parent, and that's a loving parent, and that's I would do the same for my child.
Fighting for your child's future, fighting for your child is the most natural thing.
I think what Brent and Paul are saying here is we want everyone to be able to kind of have that access to complete. So
but also
what we could be looking at is even more, Brent. It could be.
I think some parents have to fight harder. That's the point. I think some parents have to fight a lot harder than others.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, imagine if all the parents that didn't have access or don't have access now to these care plans, all of a sudden kind of do find a way to do it, or are encouraged to do it. That would mean the system would be even more loaded, wouldn't it? There'd be more pressure.
Well, if every person who's currently in the backlog, that was our evidence earlier on. Everybody's currently in the backlog looking for an AE gets one, then we just don't have the funding, the resources, the SND provision. So something's going to have to give along the way, and that is where it's up to the Labour government to solve that problem, because piling more into mainstream education and trying to put a sticking plaster over this won't cut it. But also, I would caution them to just focus on schools. You can't solve this by focusing on schools. Like I said, you need to focus on mental health services, youth mental health services. You need to recruit more You know, they want to talk about putting mental health professionals in schools. Where are they going to get them from? They don't grow on trees. It takes years to teach to train a mental health professional. Let me tell you, it takes, you need a PhD to be a clinical psychologist to get a PhD in psychology. So it takes years and £250,000 to train, you know, a clinical psychologist, and that will take how long? So we have a shortage of mental health professionals, school nurses. We've just lost all the support networks that wrap around schools, and we're left holding the fort, doing the best we can. And we've got some parents, God bless them, they're doing their best and they're frustrated. But equally, as educators, I'm frustrated. I'm seriously frustrated.
Yeah, we're on the same team. We're on the same team.
The futures of children with one hand tied behind my back. It's not fair. It's not right. It's just morally, repugnantly wrong. And it's never should have got this far. Anywho, recommendations.
Well, I think we're kind of, it's coming up to 22, Brent. So we do want to get onto the thing. So just very quickly, there's lots of recommendations that are from the report. I encourage our viewers tonight to kind of go and read up on these. But it is kind of quite broad. It kind of covers quite a bit on there. But I think the whole thing is really that there's keywords there: sustainable financing, long-term vision, about bringing in different people, different departments need to come in. Like, all of that is in there anyway to get to improving data. Actually and getting, as Bridget Phillipson was alluding to in her speech, as early as possible is the key to this. You know,
I think number 9 says that improve the data, incentives and processes to ensure children's needs are identified and supported as early as possible, particularly within early years. Can't agree with that more, because the early years are so important, and preschool. You know, what happens to a child in the first couple of years is infinitely, sometimes a lot more important, because those early years set the pattern for the rest of their lives. And any psychologist worth their salt would back me up on that. It sets the pattern, you know, and the traumas that sometimes those children suffer because they're not diagnosed can then lead to issues that we then we're triage in the secondary sector.
Just become disaffected by the system, don't you, at an early age? This school thing is not for me because of this. But we'll follow that story. I'm sure it will keep kind of coming up as the curriculum review kind of comes up. But it's nice to hear that it's kind of been very positively talked about, and there's lots of evidence being used, and the Department of Education are really listening to experts on it. So as we get to the half-point show, I want to say again...
Sorry, Adam, the rest of the speech, I will say, was a good read, and is worth a read as well. And I'll give it credit where credit's due. So far, the mood music is very good. So far, you know, the way that they've dealt with, the way they've recognized things is very good. But we need more than words. We're going to need the cavalry, and we're going to need, you know, if they're going to say it's going to take time, I would say to them, these children don't have time.
Yeah, we've got to get on with it.
Children, so get on with it as quick as possible.
Yeah, get on with it. So this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. And you can see it kind of scrolling along the bottom as John's scrolling along the bottom as he goes off there. Okay, thank you very much, John, for all your support. And as we alluded to earlier, please, if you want to kind of stay on, Brent's doing a double header tonight, and he's off with his new radio partner. I'm joking, Brent, and he's kind of carrying on. But we want to hit 9 o'clock. So teacher parent conflict. So it's been something we've kind of had as an idea for a while. So kind of, you know, where's this going, Brent? Is it getting worse?
Yeah, it's massively getting worse. And again, it is partly connected to our previous story. But there's also a societal change, a sense of entitlement. Like I say to the children when they interrupt me, please don't interrupt your teacher. I don't interrupt your dentist when you're drilling teeth. You don't interrupt the doctor when they're diagnosing your illness. Don't interrupt me as a professional. I know what I'm doing. Thanks very much. Yeah. And you get that strange look back.
Sure all of us at Teachers Talk Radio, we're imagining Brent still talking as he's getting like drilled.
No.
Still doing a kind of monologue.
My dentist is a lovely gentleman. He's been my dentist for 12 years. He's a Nigerian Irishman, and he's NHS, one of the very rare. I've got an NHS dentist, and I've actually helped him out quite on numerous occasions because his son's in the education system even arranged for his son to get a physics tutor. So lovely. I'm on really good terms with my dentist, which is great when I want to quick an appointment and I've got a bridge to get done or something like that. Look, we build relationships. I build relationship with my doctor and my dentist. I build relationships with people. I build relationships with my own children's teachers. And I try to avoid having hostile, sort of aggressive, relationships or making demands. I try and understand fellow professionals, and I suppose that comes with being a professional myself. Now, what I'm noticing as a union representative is a lot more niggle coming at me and a lot more of low-level complaints that 20 years ago would be considered absolute nonsense. Like, don't get me wrong, teachers need to be accountable, and don't get me wrong, we need to be held to a high standard, a higher standard than football referees, probably a higher standard than partying prime ministers, and a higher standard than bankers in 2008. But certainly, we teachers are held to a high esteem, high standard, and that is acceptable.
As a bare minimum, there's the Nolan principles. Plus, I think we have a kind of another level of accountability because the vulnerability of the people that we kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think there's a level, isn't there?
And there has to be that gravity of our respectability, our integrity, our professionalism has to be above reproach, and not, like I say, more so than Premier League referees, because they should too also be above reproach. But we're human beings; we make mistakes, and we should be allowed sometimes.
Are you a Liverpool fan? By any chance? Who knows?
Not if I am or not. You should be impartial, same as you should be impartial as a teacher.
Of course.
Have no favorites, show no favor, and we're human beings. The thing is, with such a big profession like teaching, there is always going to be personality clashes. There are some parents over the years, haven't really warmed to my charming Irish personality. And personally speaking, I don't care if they do or not, because they can question me personally. They don't like how I teach, but at the end of the day, if their children are learning and the children are learning well and I'm teaching them well and I'm keeping them safe, how I get there, well, again, I'm not telling my dentist to do my teeth a different way if my dentist knows what he's doing. I'm not going to tell him how they do it. Here's
a thing. Are we just calling? Are we sometimes I think about some of the stuff that kind of has come through to me in the past, and it's been labelled complaint, and actually kind of then when you talk to the parents, there's kind of nothing there really underneath it, and it just needs a kind of a little bit of a conversation. Some kind of misunderstandings happened at some point, and actually,
I think the growth of this has come from
when you talk adult to adults, and you kind of have a sensible conversation, it all kind of disappears. Are we too easy to use the word complaint sometimes? And actually,
I think the COVID situation and the depersonalization of the relationship in education has not helped. I think the transient nature of some teachers now not staying long enough in the school to build up relations, because I can lift the telephone to some parents and turn around and say, I think I've said that to your child, may have got that wrong, sorry about that. And the majority of parents I would have, they would go, you know what, so, Mr. Poland, we'll hold you in high esteem, apology accepted, move on.
Yeah.
In other words, you hold your hand up, you say, I made a mistake there, I got that wrong, really sorry about that, bang, complaint dealt with. Again, parents, even face-to-face, you sit and talk to a parent, you get these emails sometimes and you go, what is that? What's that? What? I'm not replying to that. And then you ring them up, you have a telephone conversation. Within 2 minutes, you're laughing and you're going like, that email you sent me. And they go, oh, yeah, that email's sorry. And you realize they're a human being, you're a human being.
Absolutely. And I go back to what we were saying before. We're on the same side, aren't we? I've gone into teaching ultimately to help your son or daughter, and you're their parent that wants the best for your child. So we're on the same team, aren't we? I don't know if you can see Paul's comment.
Yeah, keyboard complaints are much easier to type and speak the same word.
Keyboard warriors. I call them keyboard warriors.
Correct. And as I often said to them, when they've gone, why did you email the head teacher? Why did you involve the head teacher? I was like, it's that whole thing of like, I'm going to your boss. Why did you go to my boss? Poor head teachers these days are inundated with all this nonsense. You think, just talk to me. I said that to a parent recently. I said, well, just have a conversation. We talk to me. Why'd you go to what? Is that what it is? I want, and it is like the shop thing when you go into a shop And I think sometimes we're treated like customer service now. Teachers, we're providing a customer service, and as I often say, you know, or we Starbucks now. When you don't get the coffee with this little mocha twist, you know, you're going to go, oh, I'm going to complain. And this is the culture of that, absolutely. And you know what? Let's push it back. Am I to complain when you're not raising your child properly, you're not reading a book to them, you haven't done your homework? Do I judge you like that? No, I don't. I don't judge parents like that, because I know how difficult it is being a parent myself, and how difficult it is to raise children. It's a difficult job, and sometimes actually children behave a lot better at school than they do at home. Let's be frankly honest with you. So some parents, God bless them, are probably just taking it out on you, the frustrations they have with their own children, and you're just. And I think this is what's happened also as well. No health services, no people to get a hold of. I think sometimes we're just the front desk now that is getting the frustrations of other services that no longer exist. So I think, who can you blame? Well, that teacher, you know, instead of, and I think there's that aspect as well of people not taking responsibility for their own mess. And I think sometimes teachers need to do that too. You know, if you make a mistake, you hold your hand up and say, I got that wrong.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, coming to me as the union rep and going, I didn't do it. No, you did do it. Just accept the punishment, move on, and grow from it and evolve.
But also, like, people need to sort of completely disengage with their kind of local MP, local council, so they don't go and speak to them anymore. But they know they can pick up a phone, and they know pretty much a teacher will respond or the school will respond within 24 hours.
It's a really good point. We're almost creating, and that is driven by, and again, that's driven by this nonsense from Ofsted. When you get parents threatening Ofsted, you get head teachers being threatened. If you don't give me what I want, I'm going to go to Ofsted and your school's going to be inspected. Oh, no. What do you want? What do you want?
Yeah, what do you mean? That's blackmail. That's blackmail.
But the more parents are blackmailed, absolutely it's blackmail. It's emotional blackmail. It's blackmail. Of course it is. Absolutely. And then sometimes you get a head teacher who cave in and give in to a parent, undermine the teacher, and then the teacher's authority shot to pieces. Of course it is. Because they've been completely undermined by a parent who wins. And that's what the game that some people play. And I do think there are some parents who they take out what they think their schooling is, i.e. the teacher that they didn't like. And I've had parents say to me, you remind me of somebody I used to have at school. And I went, no, they didn't. Because teachers like me didn't exist 30 years ago. Because, you know, I'm not like the teachers that used to exist when I went to school. Are you joking? You know what I mean? I haven't shouted at children in years. I can't shout at children because these days I raise my voice and they're all running away like the bunker. Come on. This is the problem now. Every slight offense now is amplified. Everything taken out of context. Everything hyperbolized. And everything then is somebody's fault. Instead of sitting down like adults and saying, look, you're a teacher. You teach my child. I think you've got that wrong. Is that all right? Yeah, really sorry about that. Equally, there's a miscommunication. Can we figure this out? Problem is, busy teachers is, you know, we're dealing with all these emails. Maybe sometimes we do ignore a hostile, aggressive parent, but deep down I'm thinking, I'm not answering that. I'm not giving them that. And I've been told before, could you answer that email to that parent? No, I'm not answering that email. Why am I answering that email? Well, they're going to kick off. And do we give in to bullying? Oh, let's pander to bullying because that's going to make them even better, isn't it? Yeah. And I think that's the problem. Sometimes some head teachers, some senior management just don't learn the word no. And maybe the children they're producing don't learn the word no. So maybe they need to back their staff and say, really sorry, there's the door. Take yourself and your child and kindly remove yourself somewhere else. Because as frankly, honestly speaking, I am tired sometimes of defending my colleagues against what I can only consider is sometimes hostile bullying and questioning their professionalism. And yes, teachers are not angels. We make mistakes. We're human beings. We're in a high-pressure job, one of the most difficult high-pressure jobs. And we try to hold it together, do everything we're meant to do, and be perfect. And I was told recently, you need to be perfect. I went, I am not perfect.
Yeah, this is what lesson is that? What lesson is that we're trying to give? We do want to say we've made a mistake. You know, we make mistakes. It's important to say. I don't know if we can put up JLB's comment earlier, but I think that's really important about if something happens in the classroom, how quickly a child picks up their phone and immediately kind of messages home, and therefore that kind of.
And they get their roar in and their story straight.
They've got their story straight kind of early doors, but especially if a teacher says, I'm going to call home later, how quickly does that get intercepted by the student nipping off to the toilet or under the desk, getting their phone out and texting out?
Oh, the narrative is then, and equally, I had children, but I've had children engineer scenarios and try and make stuff up to destroy colleagues. And I'm like, Do you know I'm an historian? You're not a history teacher and dealing evidence. Are you serious? Absolutely serious. Like one child tried to do that, and I'm standing in front of the camera. I knew I stood in front of the camera. I thought, all right, you want to try something? There's the camera. Boom, there's the evidence. Now try again. And I think, unfortunately, there are bad faith actors out there with agendas that don't like something. They just personally don't like. And I'm going to say it, because I'm just going to say it. I think there's misogyny sometimes. I think there's racism. I think there's sexism, because we teach children across the broad section of society. And I think some teachers just don't fit in some schools, and I've had to challenge that. Where I think, are there some parents, for instance, holding grudges against the teacher they perceive to not like their children? Do they go home and the child goes home and says, Sarah doesn't like me, Miss doesn't like me? Do they then think, right, I'll show them, oh, they don't like my child? Is that the mentality that some have? Do you know, they build up that hostility as if we have this hatred of a child. I mean, I don't hate any children. I hate their behavior. It's the old mantra. I don't like their behavior. But if any of my colleagues, and I'm speaking to teachers now, if you have a hatred of some children, then kindly, please,
get out of the profession.
Leave the profession. You know what I mean? If you're a doctor and you don't like curing sick patients, maybe you shouldn't be a doctor. If you're a teacher and you don't like some children, then maybe, I'm sorry, maybe those parents are right. You've got to think carefully about your.
Can you see Paul Foss's comment there about primary schools, particularly kind of the child's word is gospel always, and therefore I guess the email is starting to be written before they've actually found out anything about what's gone on in the day at all, or even let it kind of die down. So the email's gone in.
A guilty till proven innocent now for teachers, whereas 30, 40 years ago, we were gospel, trusted. And I think successive governments, newsprint media, certain right-wing newspaper media have chipped away at us and eroded the good faith. And yeah, some teachers have done that too by bad professions. But I would say this, in all honesty, compared to previous generations of educators, we don't batter children in classrooms or humiliate them in front of classrooms and cane them, do we? We don't do any of that Victorian stuff. We look at what we actually deliver to these children in a compassionate way. I think the current crop of educators are flipping saints, and if not saints, are way beyond the previous generation. But I don't think there's a lag time between some parents' perception of us that is based upon their own experience, which may have been like mine experience as being literally humiliated in front of the class. If you've been to certain faith-based education, you've got certain experiences that I also have. And maybe they're clouding their own transference of their issues with their schooling onto their children. I think it's
projection, isn't it? It's just projection. Right, brilliant. I know you've got you need to rest your voice because you're going straight back on with Chris.
I'm on it now. I'm on lock.
In about 15 minutes. Just to clarify, because Lucy just wants to know behind the scenes, that are you a caramel macchiato Starbucks, or are you straight? You straight into?
Just give me a coffee. All this
straight coffee. I think you're a tea man. You're a tea man anyway, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, but I do have a coffee. Just go. It's like they make you use your own titles, like grande. I think, can I have a large coffee, medium coffee, small? You go in there and you're going, what's this? Just get me a coffee.
Looking at the state of your flask, Brent, I think it's kind of a tea bag goes in at the beginning of the year, doesn't it? You just keep putting water in it.
Sort of a builder. Tea bags good for 2 or 3 goes.
Yeah. We'd like to say thank you to everybody that's tuned in tonight. I don't know if you've seen that, Brent, but we've had nearly 1,000 viewers tonight. JLB's a lot.
Look,
smooth as latte. Yeah, I like a flat white, but I also just like a kind of espresso, just to kind of just get in and out. That's all you need to do with a coffee.
Do you imagine me on espressos?
Okay. Oh, there you go, Brent. 1,150 viewers tonight. So thank you very much for everyone that's tuned in tonight.
My ranting. I just got my. That is just something that rankers me. Both of those actually ranker me. Actually, ironically, for the reasons I do think they shouldn't go as far. I think it's unnecessary. It doesn't need to happen. I think the amount of complaints that are happening doesn't need to happen if you cooperate and help people. And equally with SEND, you're right. I think absolutely spot on, Adam. We all want the same thing, and educators are the meat between the sandwich, having to pick up the pieces. And what's really horrible is that we just don't get the thanks sometimes of trying to be the rescuing factor. And the frustration is that we are trying our best, being the one kind of group of people still at this. So fair play to anybody. And again, my credit goes to anybody in specifically the SEND provision sector. I think anybody who work, you guys are phenomenal. And I know a friend of mine does that job. Another friend of mine works in the PRU. I mean, the difficulty that some children have, and I think the way that some staff deal with those children compassionately, humanely, and develop them. There's a lot more to get out of children like that, isn't it? You can develop a lot more with those children, and you can make a lot more of a difference. But it takes a special type of individual to do that. So credit's due for anybody in that sector.
We're about to cut you off, Brent, but you've been so sincere that we thought we couldn't do it. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. Remember to visit John Catt Bookshop and get you 20% off by using JCTTR2425. We'll join you again next week, where we'll look again at the what's going on in the world of education. But until then, look after yourselves and good night.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.